Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Do you know what? This really feels like a transfer window like no other at Tottenham. It really does. I'm probably look as knackered as I feel because there's so much going on and so many things to kind of keep an eye on. There's so many different avenues that we can look down because of this way that Fabio Paratici works. He works in this, creating this spider's web of various deals that he might pull the trigger on one out of maybe every 10. And it's fascinating as a journalist. It's certainly keeping me on my toes. It also produces a lot of names. There's a lot of interest there. But most importantly, excuse me, we're getting to the transfer window open on Friday. And Spurs are, probably within a couple of days' time, are going to announce their third signing. Technically fourth, as I'll explain later, but in terms of first team, third, which is remarkable. Many of you, probably all of you will know exactly how Spurs operate in the transfer market. And to have 3 deals over the line by, mid-June, weeks before pre-season, a couple of weeks. It's just unheard of. And it really is. And I find it fascinating, this whole way this has all come about. We think back to that hot morning in Turin when Paratici and Conte met each other to just thrash out their transfer targets and what was to come. And kind of, you're just seeing it in operation now. And it's really interesting. We've just, I've been covering Spurs for more than 6 years now. And in transfer windows, you kind of knew in those early weeks there'd be a lot of interest, but you knew pretty much wasn't going to come to fruition. But clearly in that meeting, that morning that they sat in Turin, they just knew exactly how things had to go. And there had to be players coming in before pre-season. It had to be in a very set way. Conte very much wanted a bigger, stronger squad because he knew not only the fact that they got a Champions League, the extra subs he's able to use and everything, but also I know that man, Antonio Conte, had many occasions when he looked across at his bench and was like, okay, can't really change this game, can I? And he knew that. And I know something that frustrated him especially was the fact that Spurs had, 4 or 5 injuries in the final few weeks of the season. And he had to have 4 youth academy products on that bench. And you think about it, I'm trying to think, only Dane Scarlett had even played a couple of minutes, and we're talking a handful of minutes in the Premier League among those 4 young players as well. A big, strong squad should not have 4 injuries and have to have 4 academy kids on the bench to make up for that. It's not to say not talented young players, and hopefully will have a part to play in the future. But as a team kind of expecting to do big things, you shouldn't have to be doing that with just 4 or 5 injuries. And that was one of the things he stressed. It has to be better. Spurs have to be better. And obviously, Spurs had pumped in the extra. ENIC had pumped in the extra £150 million. That would have been communicated to him ahead of that meeting, which was why Daniel Levy didn't need to be a part of it. And it's kind of all of that is exactly why we're where we are at now. And Paratici is a workaholic. He really is. Every person I speak to that I always call him Fabio. Everyone that knows I speak to various agents is all Fabio, because I think he just has this incredible network of people that he speaks to, and he, from what I understand, has barely taken any time off since the start of the season. Since the end of the season. Just been working away on getting these things lined up. You look at it, he's brought Yves Bissouma in already. Fraser Forster's in already. And Yves Bissouma looks like it will be done within probably the next 48 to 72 hours, I'd say. Because from what I understand, he was set to fly over to the UK today. And then medical tomorrow, which is Thursday, in case you're watching this on Thursday. And then once you've done that, look, I know Spurs. Sorry, I've got dry throat for some reason. Just I'm starting this cracking timing. yeah, I know Spurs like to tack on a couple of extra days sometimes, and you think, why have you not announced this yet? But I think this one should be really wrapped up quite quickly now. And of course, I do have a couple of days off. I'm technically doing the fixtures tomorrow, and then Thursday afternoon, Friday, and Saturday I've got a couple of days off. So you can pretty much guarantee that Bissouma will be announced on one of those days. But yeah, he's heading over. So he was on international duty. Then he picked up an ankle injury. I think he came off at half time in. Sorry, I should have said, obviously, if he's flying in today, he will be staying at the lodge overnight in order to crack on straight away with his medical and all the formalities tomorrow. Personal terms aren't expected to be an issue. But yeah, sorry, on international duty. I want to get this right. So he went off at half time in Mali's game away at South Sudan last week with an ankle injury, and he has been various images. Anyone that will have been looking at his social media will have seen he's got one of those protective boots, and he's had crutches in a couple of them. But he did stress to his fans that it's not a serious problem. And obviously, we've got 2 weeks until they're back for pre-season, and then another 9 days before they fly off to Korea. So we'll find out more, obviously, in the coming days, but hopefully that's not an issue. There seems to be a thing with Spurs and players arriving injured. Sessegnon, I remember, did that back in the day. Perisic, obviously, is arriving with an injury, but he should be fit for the first day, if not the first couple of days of pre-season. I don't think Forster's got an injury, not we've been made aware of. But yeah, I think the thing with Bissouma is he is a ready-made Premier League player. He has, on the pitch, always impressed me. Especially against Spurs. Seems to play very well against Spurs. He is, I think you can say he's been one of the best players, I'd say, midfielders in the Premier League in the last couple of years. I think he's blossomed into a really good player. I think he's had a couple of knee issues in recent seasons, but didn't miss too many games last year. And yeah, he is a dominant midfield player. He's got a bit of everything. I was kind of reading some really interesting bits and pieces on him in the last couple of days because I think I said in the last video that he was a player that Spurs were really looking at as one of their potential kind of signings that looking at from the Premier League. So I kind of did a bit more reading up on him, and it's some of the stuff about him and just the way he plays, the tactical way he plays the game. He likes to play on the on the front foot. He likes to get the team very quickly moving into attack, and that's exactly what Conte wants from his central midfielders. We've said that before about, and that's why he likes Skip. My voice is going to absolutely ruin me during this, isn't it? Do you know what? I'm going to have a quick drink, as I've got one right here. Spurs cup. No, the club didn't give it to me. I've had that for years, which is why the cockerel on it is pretty much faded and going. But yeah, Bissouma. Likes to get the ball on the front foot very quickly. Likes to take up these really kind of positions in the midfield to receive the ball that maybe other midfielders wouldn't. He likes to take a little bit of a risk, maybe a little bit of a Bentancur about him in that respect. And that quality now in the midfield, that's options, isn't it? You've got Bissouma, you've got Højbjerg, you've got Bentancur, you've got Skip. Probably not going to have Winks because I imagine he'll be off. I know Everton really like him, among a few others. But still, that four, that is a hell of a four for various competitions, and they will all play games. What that means I know I've said before, Paratici really loves Weston McKennie from Juventus and had him above Bentancur on his January want list, but he couldn't get him away at that point. What that means, we'll see. I'd say right now it would look as if that's unlikely. However, I guess it depends, A, on what the price would be, B, on whether anyone else leaves as well as Winks. I mean, you are going to lose, you'd think, this summer, Winks, Lo Celso and Ndombele. So that is 3 midfield players going. So maybe if he feels he needs a 5th, because obviously if he wants to play with a 3-5-2, but I just think, as I've said before, I think that extra player for that role is more likely to be a creative central midfielder. But, McKennie is a threat in the box as well. He likes to break into the box. So whether Paratici just says to Spurs, look, this guy is going to be absolutely class and tries to push it through, and we'll see. We'll see. But I'd say at the moment, Bissouma probably has made that less of a priority. What else we've got? Bissouma. Obviously, look, he's made headlines off the pitch this season. What I would say about this, it's UK journalism is very restrictive in talking about anything to do with ongoing police investigation and stuff like this. Look, I've been a journalist for many, many years, probably too long. I've been a journalist for, it'll be 20 years next year. And back in the day, well, I was a news reporter for 5 years, and there's a very set way you can talk about various things when it comes to incidents and stuff. And I think the UK may be slightly different to other countries. I don't know how it works, but in the UK we have a very set way we have to write about stuff. So the best thing I think I can say on this subject is that if you look at the articles I wrote yesterday about Bissouma, I spoke. I wrote also about an incident that took place in Brighton back in October. And writing about that incident, I spoke to Sussex Police about that incident, and they gave me a statement on the current situation of things that had happened in that incident. So I think if you probably go and have a look at my stories, and that will give you a statement about that incident, and read it very carefully in the wording from the police, and then obviously you will be better informed about what happened in that incident to a degree. But like I say, it's really difficult. It's really difficult to write or speak about anything because, yeah, that's the difficulties on reporting on ongoing police investigations. So, that's all I can say on anything about off-the-pitch headlines when it comes to things like that. So, yeah. So that's Bissouma. Hopefully, I think it is likely to be one of my days off. There's no questions about him as a talented player. Certainly is up there. Like I say, the amount of games that I've seen him really be a threat against Spurs. And I'd say also in the big matches, he also seems to really turn up. And I think he's been a major thrust of why Brighton under Potter have been a rising force, I guess is the best way to say it. Price-wise, I haven't mentioned that, have I? It looks like it's going to be a deal that eventually, with add-ons, can be over 30 million. I think in terms of the basic, looking at far less than that, probably less than 25 million, I think, in the basics. And the reasoning behind that is because he's only got a year left on his contract. A lot of Premier League clubs have been looking at him, a lot of the big boys. Spurs have stolen a march in there, and he's going to be a huge addition to that Tottenham Hotspur midfield. It really is. There's more to come. Of course, there's more to come. Bissouma is not going to be the last player to walk through the door. I would say he's not going to be the last player to walk through the door before pre-season begins. I'd imagine that they will push through at least one, if not two more, before that period. Because I've said it before. Conte wants at least 6 new players in through the door. He wants players that will be there for pre-season. He wants players that can hit the ground running rather than risks and gambles. There's going to be outgoings. Like I say, Lo Celso on Dembele. Brian Hill is probably going to go out on loan again. Joe Rodon will want its first team regular football, as will Winks. Steven Bergwijn, we know, obviously, Ajax want to sign him, but they've got to get up to that price tag, which is, that Spurs want to recoup pretty much as much of the £27 million they spent on him, was it PSV Eindhoven, as they can. So as much as Bergwijn wants to go and as much as Ajax want him, they've got to show that in the, in the words of Cuba Gooding Jr. from Jerry Maguire, show me the money. Well, not me, but show Tottenham money because, they're going to show how much they want him, really. And then, like I say, Spurs willing to listen to offers for Sergio Reguilon, Emerson Royale. Davinson Sanchez is an interesting one as well. I found out today that Monaco have been showing interest in him over a prolonged period of time. So that potentially could be one to look at. And I do wonder, when it comes to that, whether there's any interest at all from Spurs looking at Benoit Badiashile. Oh, that probably killed the pronunciation of that. So if you're not aware of who he is, he's a 21-year-old centre-back, France under-21 international, left-sided, Highly rated, very highly rated, big lad. I think he might be 6'3". I think he might even have the same agent as Tongi, possibly. I just wonder whether in any talks that take place over Davinson Sanchez, Spurs have a little look at him as well. I think he's got 2 years left on his deal, I think. Yeah, maybe one to keep an eye on. I'm not saying it's definite. It's kind of me just spitballing, but just the fact that one of the clubs that is interested, and I'd imagine Sanchez would be a much bigger fee. What's he got? I think he'll have 2 years left as well. Yeah, I think it'll be a bigger fee, to be honest. Well, his nose going up and down. Obviously, Christian Eriksen, we know, is a potential incoming. Be interesting to see what happens with that in the weeks ahead. Eriksen has made it very clear he's not going to rush his decision. He's going to think about it. He's got a fair few offers to go through. Obviously, there's been Man U touted as being interested as well in recent days. It's interesting. Well, like I said, I kind of maintain this thing. What I was told, and this was towards the end of the season, was that Eriksen's preference, if possible, would be to stay in London. Family reasons and things like that. Obviously, Brentford are in London, so that could potentially mean them as well. Although there seems to be a little movement or certain reports coming from the Brentford side of things that maybe they're not expecting to be able to keep him. Spurs will be in a strong position if they fully go for him and battle for him. Conte factor, Champions League factor. Yeah, if they really want to fight to bring him back, then I think they'll be in a very good position to do so. Look, he didn't, from what I understand, leave the club on the best terms of the hierarchy, but he does love Spurs, and everyone I've ever spoken to who knows him said that as well. United is an interesting one. Obviously, Man United is the big name. Not Champions League football there. Obviously, it's a former Ajax boss there now in Ten Hag, who maybe will understand him well. Obviously, they'll have a part to play in it. And obviously, there are other offers as well. We don't know who they are. Obviously, there's certain countries that I think it's definitely Italy. Obviously, he can't play in because of the device he's had fitted to restart his heart. And obviously, the other thing with Eriksen as well, I guess, is on that subject, is knowing if he is able to cope with the demands of what Conte requires from you physically. And he will know that from having spent that time. I've seen a lot of people saying, Conte didn't play him, but he actually did win his way into kind of Conte's affection. That last 6 months, it was after January transfer window when he was linked with a move, he absolutely became a regular for Conte and was played his part and into a second, I think, at that point, and he played his part in helping taking them to the title. So yeah, keep an eye on Eriksen's situation. It's definitely one that I don't know whether we'll get a quick resolution on it or not. Depends, obviously he's now, as I've said this a million times, the international break was a bit of a delayer in lots of things and people just sitting down and having proper time to think about things away from the pressures of football and training and stuff like that. And obviously Eriksen has now finished his time with Denmark. He will go away and have a proper holiday and think about things. So maybe we'll start to see things come to fruition in that. But that's the reason that one hasn't been going that quickly. And I think similar is the Jed Spence situation. From what we're hearing now, it sounds like he does favour a move to Spurs. Attracted by working with Conte and the Champions League and all of that as well. There are other clubs. It's not a done deal. There are at all. It's not a done deal. Spurs still have to agree a fee with Middlesbrough. That's by no means definite at the moment. I'm sure Middlesbrough want to get the most they can. I'd imagine Spurs, knowing that he's essentially had this breakout season. And a lot of work. He's very raw, of course, as well. So it'd be interesting. I think Middlesbrough has talk of more than 20 million. I do wonder whether Spurs look to pay that or whether they look to load things with add-ons and potential future things. So, essentially protecting themselves, but also Middlesbrough would get their money. This is just me speculating, by the way, but certainly from what I understand, nothing agreed at this point before I did this video. Things can move very quickly, of course. The other teams obviously interested in him as well were Borussia Dortmund, Roma, Newcastle, Brentford and Forest. I'd say Dortmund probably were going to be one of the main opposition there because obviously they can also provide Champions League football. I've said my opinion on Jed Spencer. I'm probably not going to crack on about him too much, but I do think he could be a very, very good player. And I like the idea of the dynamic of him with an older player at Tottenham, kind of getting that experience on the job. In terms of other homegrown players, it's an interesting one. I heard a little bit of kind of talk about Spurs having a little bit of interest in Blackburn's Ben Brereton Diaz. He's a 23-year-old striker, if you're not aware of him. I should stress that from what I understand, I don't think there's been any camp. I don't think there's been any contact with his camp in a few months. I'm talking about more like historic interest. But I just wonder whether that gets resurrected this summer or not. It might not. It might not. It might be something that ended up being a dead end. But when I looked at kind of into his stuff today, 23 years old, last year of his contract, scored 22 goals in the Championship last season. He's homegrown, but because his mum's from Chile, he actually is a Chile international. And there's a really cool story about that as well. You should read about it. In a very short summary, essentially, fans of the game Football Manager, I'm sure many of you have played it. I certainly have and still do on occasions. Football Manager fans kind of started a bit of a petition because of his Chilean mother to get him in the Chile national team. And lo and behold, it happened. And it's a really cool story. You should look it up. But anyway, yeah, he's quite a physical striker. Like I said, 22 goals. I think he got a load of assists as well, maybe 7 or 9 assists, something like that. He's got a few clubs looking at him. From what I understand, Leeds, West Ham, a few La Liga clubs look at him. And like I say, he's in the last year of his contract. So you're talking about maybe only 13, 15 million for him. And again, I'm not saying that Spurs are definitely going to go in for him or sign him, but I know there's been a little bit of historic interest there. But no contact, like I say, for a few months. But I just wonder whether when they see the other clubs going for him, whether they think, do you know what? As a backup, as a homegrown player, again, something else that Spurs are trying to look at for a few of them this window, a player who probably would be willing to take a slightly less minutes this season in order to learn, from the likes of Kane and Sonny, and he would get game time because of the amount of matches. I just wonder whether that's the one to keep an eye on or not. It may not. He may end up going elsewhere, but just keeping a little eye in terms of homegrown. I was trying to look at kind of homegrown players in the last few days, and his was one name that came up. Keep a little eye. Like I say, this is not one for aggregator accounts out there to start going, Gold says, and all of this. I'm not. I know there's a little bit of historic interest there from Spurs, and I just wonder whether at some point in the summer they have a little look at him or not as a homegrown option. Obviously, we've seen the Richarlison stuff this week, which I've obviously spoke about in the last video, so I won't go over that too much. That just other than monitoring that situation, and we'll see where that goes. And obviously, Everton's interest in Harry Winks could play its part in where that goes as well. But Everton, I think, wanting a lot of money for him. A lot of money for him. And I guess it comes to a point where it's whether that's worth it for a player who ultimately is probably not going to be a starting player week in, week out. Obviously, I should stress with this, when we talk about the players that Spurs are looking to bring in, no player should really be coming in expecting to be a backup, maybe other than that striker and obviously Fraser Forster. Otherwise, every player should be thinking, I can win a spot in this team. And that's the way that all footballers should think. But I would say with Richarlison, if you were to pick your team right now, or Conte was, the incredible form that Kulusevski was in, it's probably going to be that front three of Son, Kane and Kulusevski. So with talk of Richarlison being worth like up to 70 million, I think it was 70 million euros, I think it was. That's a lot of money for a squad player. But yes, I know they have to improve the squad, but my feeling, this is just purely me, if you're spending that sort of money, I think it's probably on a player that you expect to go bang straight into your first team, starting 11. That's just my thoughts. Spurs may look at it differently. They may decide that they just need to improve that squad. Who else? Premier League players. We know they've got an interest in Rafinha at Leeds, who is class. I think he'll have a few looking for him this summer. I think there's quite a few. Obviously, I've said about Alan St. Maximin before as well. Another one to kind of play who can play up front or on those wide positions. So I do think they'll have a little look at those kind of players because the Premier League, if you've got Premier League experience, you are more ready-made. You are going to settle straight, hopefully, into that team. It's just then adjusting to a new team and tactics and manager, whereas you've already ticked off the Premier League box. So physical side is not going to be an issue. I would say the only problem with the Premier League is it just brings that extra price, doesn't it? It does. All the players' prices are bumped up, and that's what you'll see. We know about centre-backs, so I'm not going to probably go on about those. Same old names we know for centre-backs: Guardiola, Pau Torres, Mark Guay, Gleison Bremer, Clement Longley. As I told you last week, Ilya Zabarny, the young 19-year-old Ukrainian international. There will be others. Who did I mention before? Badiashile at Monaco. He could potentially be someone they look at. There's obviously the Alessandro Bastoni stuff still in the background. The door's not entirely closed, I don't think, until Inter are able to offload players and raise some money for incoming transfers. I don't think you can entirely close that door until that happens. I would say it's unlikely because of the, like I said, his agent coming out having literally spoken to the Inter hierarchy and saying no, he's not going anywhere. But if there's any way that they can't offload Skriniar to PSG, let's say, or other players are tricky to go, Spurs make a big bid for him, maybe it changes their mind. But I just feel like there's a point where Spurs have to start looking elsewhere. And whether that is Pau Torres at Villarreal, obviously they've got a big interest in as well. Whatever it is, it has to. I don't think they can hang around. I think that's it. As good as Bastoni is, and as much as Conte and Paratici both love him, how long do you wait? I guess is the question. I think the other key thing as well to talk about when it comes to Tottenham as well is that the key men at Spurs are so happy right now, and that's a huge thing. Sonny is obviously very happy after a terrific season. Golden Boot winner Sonny. Like I've said before, what I'm expecting to see in Korea when we head off there for the tour, it's just going to be madness. It's going to be incredible, especially with him being the Golden Boot win. It's just yet another thing for him. Or I should say on him, I saw some quotes floating about from his father, which I think were taken out of context. Sung-Mo Lee, who's an excellent journalist that I know who covers all South Korean football and obviously Premier League and European football as well. Check out his Twitter account. I retweeted a couple of his tweets. Just a really interesting breakdown of what Son's dad actually said. And it was all, from what I can understand, just him being very humble and that humble nature that Sonny's got as well that comes from his dad. And it's just about needing to be better and always bettering yourself, never really believing you're world class and things like that. So have a little look at that because I've seen some people taking it in a different way and it apparently just wasn't meant in that way whatsoever. And I think there's also some older quotes doing the rounds as well. But yeah, so have a little look at that. So that's Sonny, and Harry Kane obviously is very happy. You can see all his quotes coming out for the England. It's almost gone the other way around now. It kind of felt like at Spurs, England was his happy place and Spurs maybe less so last year. Whereas I feel like that kind of almost gone the other way. England obviously having issues, really struggling. Almost feels like watching them was a bit like watching Harry trying to play in Nuno's team and just struggling for service, he just looked a class above at times. Other than the slightly dodgy looking penalty incident where it seemed to go down very easily without any contact that I could see. But other than that, he did look, I felt, a cut above at times, some of the things he was doing with the ball. And I just find it interesting now that it's almost like Spurs has become his happy place again. And everything he's saying is about being excited about what the future holds. And I've told you before, if this continues this level of ambition, Bissouma is another. That's an ambition signing. That is a very good midfielder. coming into Tottenham. Is a player who, wanted Champions League football, and I think he will be terrific in the Champions League as well. I'm still intrigued to see what partnerships that Conte kind of works with there, because who plays with who. Skippy was really coming on hugely, and Conte really liked him. Højbjerg as well is probably the general in that midfield. But are Bentancur and Bissouma going to be the first choice pairing? I know there are so many big games, and the beauty of the Champions League is it means that there's more Premier League games for other players, because you just can't play your strongest team in every single game. You have to rotate. And this is when I say about Conte looking at his bench and thinking, that's one of the key things he wanted, was to be able to look at that bench and see players of a similar standard to be able to bring on, so there's no drop in quality when he makes a substitution. I should say those young players, I'm not saying it's a drop in quality, they obviously have the potential to be that quality, but right now they're not there. So I'm intrigued to see what that midfield pairing, if everyone's fit on that opening day of the season, we will find out the fixtures and who that's going to be tomorrow morning. But I'm intrigued to know kind of who he sees as being slightly too similar, who he feels works better, which of them maybe can work as a 3 if needed. It's going to be fascinating to see that, because they are all different players, but they also have some similar attributes, those 4 central midfielders. But back to Harry. Yeah, if all continues as it is, as I've told you before, he'll be willing to open, talks about potential new contracts and stuff like that. So happy people. It's like a happy camp at Spurs right now. It's really interesting. It'd be interesting to see how all these new signings come in, and their mentality, their characters, how they gel in the dressing room, and hopefully having no one that causes any issues. But that's about Spurs. This is about their way of looking at things, and knowing exactly they've got to judge characters. They've got to judge every single side of it before they make a signing. Yeah, very interesting to see. So I did mention earlier there was another signing. Not necessarily first team, but it's young 19-year-old goalkeeper Josh Keeley, young Irish under-19 international, very highly rated, a lot of good stuff said about him. He comes from St Patrick's Athletic in the Irish League, and it's interesting, he comes at a time when Spurs have just released 5 different goalkeepers. So if you weren't aware, obviously Glini left at the end of his loan spell, but also from the academy, Kapka Kullerwitz, Timothy Latutala, Josh Oluwayemi and Isaac Solberg all left. So that's a big old void in the reserve, the under-23s, and not reserves nowadays, development squad, and the under-18s as well. So I had someone asking me earlier, is Josh Keeley coming in as the number 3 goalkeeper? No, he's only 19. He's not ready for that yet. He'd only has appeared in, I think, 1 top-flight game this season. I think it was the FAI Cup for St Patrick's. He's very much was a young player within their academy, very talented one, but hadn't really broken into be a regular there yet. He was, like I say, 19. He's only 19. In goalkeeper years, that's almost like a baby for most keepers. But he's going to come to Spurs, and he will be involved with, the under-23s, the development squad. Him and, I'd say, Luca Gunter are going to be making up the bulk of that. Playing those development squad games as well. And I'm trying to think if he is. I wonder if he's able to play. I think he might be able to play in the UEFA Youth League as well, because that's coming back to Tottenham. I love watching those games. That was one of the cool things about having a Champions League matches, is that the day before you always get the UEFA Youth League games. If you're not aware of what the UEFA Youth League is, it's a competition. It's the top tier European competition for under-19s. It mirrors the Champions League in the group stages, so you get the same home and away against the same teams that are drawn with the first team in the Champions League group stages. And it's really cool. The other thing that's really cool is, for me, is often the matches away will be played at, all of them will be played at training grounds most of the time. So over the years, I've got to see some very cool training grounds in various places like Bayern Munich, PSV, Inter Milan, various places. Just get a little. Don't often get to go to their training grounds. Often press conferences are held in the stadiums as well. So anyway, back to my original point of that was that I think, yes, actually definitely, because I remember looking it up, Josh Keeley has played in 3 UEFA Youth League matches this season for St Patrick's. So next season he will, won't be overawed by this competition against some of the best young players in Europe. So good for him. Little bits about him. Signed his first professional 2-year deal in January. Helped Athletic to the SSE Airtricity National Under-19 League title. I saw reports that he'd had trials with Everton, Leicester, Villa on a couple of occasions, Aberdeen. But it was Spurs that managed to snap him up. Following somewhat in the footsteps of Troy Parrott from those years ago. Obviously different team. Troy Parrott was from Belvedere. But yeah, another talented young Irish player. And obviously, it's not just on the pitch, but off the pitch, Paratici has been busy. Honestly, the man is a workhorse. He really is. Off the pitch, if you haven't seen, Spurs have made changes behind the scenes in terms of their staff. I said this before about Steve Hitchen and the role kind of that he was in, that had been left. And we talked about Andy Scolding coming in from Rangers, who was their chief scout. Now we've kind of got fleshed out what the exact structure is going to be. So, Greta Steinson is coming in. He was most recently at Everton. I think he was there for about 4 years. Previously, he was technical director at Fleetwood Town. He used to be a Bolton defender. I think he is 40 years old. He is. That's it. He's head of recruitment and development for 3 years at Everton. That's what he was. Fleetwood Town for 4 years. He was part of that. They had a big cull behind the scenes at Everton in December. There was a bit of a power struggle, I think, going on with Rafa Benitez and the recruitment staff. And Marcel Brands, there's another chap as well that left. Oh, Dan Purdy, that was it, the manager of scouting operations. They all left in one big clear out. And obviously we know what happened next. Benitez didn't last too much longer and then Lampard came in. But yeah, so quite a few good things people have said about him as well in terms of his ability to pick out players. Obviously knows the English game, the British game inside out. So his title will be Performance Director. So Steve Hitchen's title was Technical Performance Director. I wonder whether, as I said before, I think he's still on his gardening leave, so whether technically that title isn't there. Technically it's such a good use because it's technical that has been removed. So I wonder whether that's not there to be used anymore because he currently, I think if you're on gardening leave, technically you're still employed, aren't you, in that same role? So Greta Steinson will be Performance Director. Andy Scolding will come in as Assistant Performance Director to Steinson. Like I say, 4 years at Rangers. His official title at Rangers was Head of Scouting. Previously, he'd been with the FA, Salford City as an advisor, Olympiacos, Valencia. Lots of experience. Another one who's got a lot of people saying good things about him. So that's the makeup of first team recruitment feeding into Paratici. Essentially with Paratici, it just allows him to crack on with what he does best, which is work in the transfer market and being the voice in the boardroom, getting what he wants and things like that. He's very good at that apparently. And that is from, I guess, 11 years of manoeuvring in Juventus with the powerful figures there, and Agnelli. And so this allows him to crack on with that. And Steinson and Scolding will be very much kind of more running the day-to-day element as well of the first team. I think he'll take more of what Hitchen's role was, I guess, which was, it was a bit of academy, bit of first team, bit of everything, bit of performance element, sports science, looking over all of those things. Like I said, if you didn't see the last video, Hitchen and Paratici had undertaken together a big, an appraisal essentially of every department within the club on the football side of things, and they were given a bit of an increased budget for various things as well by the club, and that has resulted into this new look structure. I mean, I don't know kind of how that would have worked if Hitchen had stayed. I presume he would have had Steinson's role with Scolding reporting, because Scolding had worked with him way back at Liverpool. So I don't know whether that would happen. But it doesn't matter now because he is no longer part of first team or Spurs matters So Steinson and Scolding, and then you've got underneath that with the youth set up in the academy. The academy manager is Dean Rastrick, who's a very pleasant chap, very knowledgeable guy. Spoken to him a couple of times at various kind of youth games and things like that. Very, very good chap, and really switched on with the young players. Everyone involved with the young players at Spurs that I've ever spoken to, they always have good things to say about Dean Rastrick and the way he looks after players and the relationships he forms with them as well. So coming into that side of things to kind of, I guess, help that bridge, I guess, between the first team and the reserves, academy. I've got to get reserves out of my head. And the youth team, the academy and everything is, I want to get his name right, Simon Davies. So, there's not the Simon Davies you might be thinking of. It's not the former Spurs midfielder who they signed from, was it Peterborough with Etherington? I think it was, who played for Wales. This Simon Davies did actually play for Wales once, but it's not the same guy. 48-year-old, former Man City and Anderlecht coach. He followed Company to Anderlecht to... I think he ended up actually managing the team for 4 or 5 games when Company went back to being a player for a little while. So he comes in, and his title is the very modern kind of title of Head of Methodology, which in essence will be making sure that the academy and first team have that synergy and sorry for the jargon, but it's kind of what it is, and making sure that the players that come out of the academy, I guess, are ready to slip straight into the first team in a similar style of football. So yeah, so he'll be coming in as well. It's going to be a very, very different Tottenham Hotspur. It really, really is. It's going to be so different to the one that even we ended last season with. You know, you look at the 3 players that have come in, you look at the new staff behind the door, coming in behind the scenes. It's going to be very different, very interesting. Paratici's team around him is going to be interesting to see how that works. And obviously Conte's team in front of him is going to be very interesting. And there's so much more to come. Right, I think I've covered everything I wanted to in the kind of normal stuff. So I'm probably going to try and answer a few questions that were asked underneath the last video. I've still got to go back to the second half of the Q&A from the previous one. This is what I mean. The transfer window, so much is happening. I haven't been able to just kind of stop and just do a normal Q&A video. And like I say, I'm away for a couple of days, but I might try to do that on Sunday if loads of stuff hasn't happened while I've been off, which it probably will. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save those questions that were put under the video a couple of days back, maybe a week ago now, for its own thing. So don't worry, if you did ask a question there, I am going to answer them at some point. But people were asking questions underneath the last video. So just to fill the last maybe 15 minutes or so to maybe give you some fresh stuff, I shall answer some of these even. Let's have a look. Where should we go here? Well, there you go. Mr. Mantis says, Mr. Gold, do you think it's a good time for you to go on a holiday? I am having a couple of days off, don't worry. Yes, that never gets boring when people say that ever. Let's have a look. I should have really looked at the questions. Someone told me how to say Matt Doherty. Doherty. That's how I'm supposed to say it. Apparently, the D and O are the first 2 letters of Fox, says Paddy Stack. Matt Doherty. Matt Doherty. I tell you, the amount of people that told me how to say it, and they all tell me different ways of saying it. I can't win. Right. So, question. Here we go. I'm hoping this is a joke. Jake Maddox asks, "Hi Ali, any word on the young centre midfielder we signed from League One last season? Can't remember his name or club, but he went straight back on loan. Is he coming into the first team or back out on loan again?" So the reason I said I hope that's a joke, because you probably would have noticed if you'd watched the last couple of videos that I keep having people asking me, "So what's happening with Pape Matar?" And pretty much in every video I talk about Pape Matar, and I explain that he had a tough but learning season back at Metz on loan, played almost every game was available for, started 2/3 of them, really came on at the end of the season as well and almost gave them a chance to staying up, but ultimately they didn't, lost on the final day to PSG, and he will come back and Conte will have a good look at him in pre-season, but I'd imagine, unless he ends up being that 5th bit of cover for the central midfield until at least January, you'd think he will probably go on loan because physically, maybe needs a little bit of kind of bumping up. He is only 19 years old. So yeah, there you go. I have spoken about Pape Matar again. I have. And I appreciate not everyone sees every video. So hopefully not. That wasn't meant to sound patronising. It just made me chuckle. Tim Head asks, if Christian Eriksen does come back, is he allowed to play Champions League football in certain countries? I know there's restrictions on where he can sign, but what about where he can play? I don't think it's where he can play. I think it's just what leagues he can play in, who he can sign for. So yeah, not quite that. Ray C asks, again, another Eriksen question. I was under the impression that Eriksen didn't play much under Conte into Milan, so what would be different this time around? Like I said earlier, things changed in the second half of the season, very much so second half of that season they won the title. He became a real key part. Played in a 3-5-2, either in the centre of the midfield three or sometimes on the left. Huge part of them winning the Scudetto. So definitely Conte really started to understand him. I think Eriksen understood what he wanted from him, and that makes the whole adaptation much easier if he were to come back to Tottenham. Osborne 2 asks, is your insider at Spurs Doris the Tea Lady? You can tell us. No. No. I don't even know there is Doris the Tea Lady. Her name might be Mabel. What else we got here? Sandeep Kumar asks, Harvey White update. Any chance of him making the senior team squad? Well, I looked back at it. I think he was involved. He was on the bench almost 20 times for Spurs last season in the first team squad. Do you know what? I didn't actually realise it was that many. He's very versatile, is young Harvey. Can play obviously in the central midfield as a deeper player, or he can play further up the pitch as a bit more of a creative type. Can play as a left back, I imagine a left wing back as well. Brilliant set pieces, arguably one of the, or if not the best free kick taker or set piece taker at the club. Superb at that. He is 2021 now. Strange season for him, because in terms of development off the pitch, he would have got a lot from being around those players and Conte and really soaking up what they do on a match day. But obviously never actually came on the pitch. Did he even get a minute? I'm trying to think if he got any minutes. He might have done in the Conference League early on. I'm trying to remember now. It's been a long season. But ultimately, I'd imagine it's a difficult one, because I was about to say you'd think he now deserves to go out on loan. I think he's got a long contract. They signed a 4-year one, I think, back in 2020. So I think he's still got 2 years left on that. What I would say is, for me personally, I think he needs a loan. He went to Portsmouth for half a season, did well. Then obviously spent the entirety of last season at Spurs. I think a lot of that was to do with the Conference League and the fact that they knew, that they were going to be able to use a lot of younger players in the early stages especially. Next season, with the squad being bigger, I'd say there will be less academy opportunities. But what there also will be is that Champions League, you've got 12 players on the bench. So you are going to need some young players there. But I just wonder whether it's almost unfair on Harvey White. I personally would put him out on loan and let him improve his education, I guess, of being a first team starting player somewhere. Get him the right loan move and move on from there, I'd say. But he's a very talented young man. He is. Sushruth Vakaleri asks, just a question on Doherty. When can we expect him to return from injury? There's been no real update on that. What we were told at the start was when he was having his knee injury, he was going to be back for pre-season. That was what we were told. I'll chase that one out. Obviously, everything's very transfer orientated at the moment. Obviously, I told you before that Skippy will be back, should be back and fine for the first day of pre-season. Perisic will be back, if not for the first day, but a couple of days in. Tanganga is meant to be during pre-season. I'd imagine Doherty, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to get my head around that, hasn't changed. But I will look into that. I will get back to you with a more specific answer on that one. John P asked, do you think Spencer and Richarlison are 100% Conte signings? I think Spence, from what I understand, definitely Paratici has watched him. I know that in person. Conte will be aware that they need some homegrown players as well, and that Spence fits his ideal wing back a lot better than certainly some of the options out there. So Richarlison will be a player he knows very well as well. Like I said, I know that's a player that Paratici really likes. Nobody is going to get signed off without Conte wanting them. Let's put it that way. Like I say, I do wonder, and this is purely speculation, I do wonder whether Paratici was more wanting Bissouma and Conte was more wanting McKennie. And ultimately, you do what your head coach wants, especially when it's Antonio Conte. So, and this is again now speculation. That's just me wondering. It may have been other matters. It may have been the fact that, McKennie might have been a bigger fee. It could be down to anything, or that he's not Premier League, experience or anything. But I'd say, Conte, especially when Spurs are doing everything to keep him happy this summer, signings will be very much signed off by Conte. They will. Lee Waller 83 asks, if I gave you £1 to bet the year and trophy Spurs win next, what would you go for? I think they might win a trophy this year. Or this year, 2023. I'm going to go 2023. I think they might. I think that will be the aim. Look, he's going to transform this team. They're going to be a much better team. And I don't think just finishing fourth will be the aim. I think they will be aiming higher than that. But realistically, when you see Liverpool and Man City and how far ahead they were, and then they both sign Erling Haaland and Darwin Núñez, they're not sitting still. So I do think Spurs could seriously try to push Chelsea this season, because I think Chelsea are going to be in a state of flux because of everything that's happened there. I seriously do think Spurs could be looking higher. But I think cup-wise, why not? Why not look at both domestic cups? And Spurs have got to the Champions League final before. I know Conte hasn't got a great record as a manager in that competition, but Spurs have got experience in that. And some of their big players have got experience in that as well. So I'm not saying they're going to win it, but certainly you'd bet on them having that little bit of nous to get through some games where maybe other teams might not, because they've been there and done that. I'm going to go 2023. Maybe one of the domestic cups. Mark Shaz says, Ali, any info on Belotti? I said, I think in the last video, that from what I understand, Paratici maybe isn't the biggest fan. The biggest fan. That's not the best way to put it. The best way to put it is probably he doesn't see Belotti as a player who would fit exactly what they're trying to do with Conte and at Tottenham. And so what I understand is he's swerved away from that potential free transfer. Stevie Fraser asks, did you use phrases like, I know very well that, before Conte arrived? I'll be looking out for sentences that start with but. If you have picked up phrases from him, it only shows you to be an empathic, I think that means character. Or empathetic character. I don't think I've picked anything up from Conte in terms of the way he speaks. Don't know. Maybe you guys would be the best judge of that. I think I've always said I know very well that. I think that is probably a phrase that I've used a lot. What else we got here? Jet Spence, we've said that. Alfie Batchelor says, did you have to mention the Grealish deal? Still brings me trauma to this day. Me too. I know some people have been a little bit harder on in the season because he stepped up to a different level and hasn't always been a first-team starter for Man City, but I still think at that time, under Poch, I think he could have been a real game changer for Tottenham. I really do. I think that's mostly it, really, from the questions that were on the last video. Just want to check I haven't missed anything. There's a question about Bissouma, which obviously we know now what's happening with him. And that's it, I think. Yeah, that's it. Other than someone having a bit of a pop at Ward-Prowse, but that's not exactly a question for me. So there you go. Right, well, I'm going to probably head off then, leave that there, because I've got Get up early in the morning to do the fixtures, which are going to be out tomorrow morning. Hopefully Spurs get... it's a difficult one. It's one of those where you could say, I hope they get a good run. I hope they get this nice little thing. But ultimately, two things. You've got to play every team twice, whatever. Sometimes what looks like a hard run can change because certain players could be missing for the opposition. And also, fixtures change. They're going to change. As soon as the Champions League fixtures come out for Spurs, they're naturally going to knock on other fixtures and other things will cause them to move. So everyone gets always very excited about the fixtures. And, what does that mean for them? I think the only things you can probably take from it is the very start to the season, how it's going to look and what kind of... I mean, let's be honest, last season it was Man City and yet Spurs won it under Nuno. So it doesn't always mean to be all and end all, but it gives you a sense of maybe whether you can build up a bit of momentum, I guess, early in the season. And then the running can be quite important. Like I say, some of those games can change, but I think you can see generally what kind of running, what it's going to look like and how much... Yeah, I guess that's the best way to look at it. I think we kind of looked at last season's quite early on and thought, okay, that's not too bad. Obviously, it got messed up a little bit with the North London derby suddenly being chucked from way earlier. Was it January? And then chucked to the end of the season. So it can alter. But I think that's probably all you can do is get a sense of the start and the running. Also, loosely, when you're going to have your big derby matches. Obviously, we're going to have the very different... context of the season with the World Cup in the winter, and obviously it looks like today there's some stories about the fact that it looks like those festive games between Boxing Day and New Year looks like they might not be in the fixtures tomorrow, but you'll know where you're going to be on Boxing Day or at least the Christmas period. They don't really change. It's normally quite a localish game. Which means I'll now have to go somewhere ridiculous. And obviously we have the new teams in there as well. We have the promoted teams of Forest, and the City Ground will be a new one for me. I'd rather not have a big trip on the first day. That would be nice. I'm trying to think. Spurs have had home last season. They've had Newcastle away a couple of times on the first day of the season in previous years. But yeah. Hopefully nothing too far-flung for the first one would be nice. And then end of the season, yeah, a nice little run-in would be handy. But like I say, it'll get mixed up anyway. So yeah, fixtures tomorrow. Then tomorrow afternoon, I have start my 2.5 days off, which I am really looking forward to because, as I said at the start of this, it's a bit knackering, this whole transfer lark. I must admit, as a journalist, I prefer the grind of matches. I think your body adjusts to that, even when they're like every few days. Whereas the transfer one's a whole different thing. It's a lot of time spent on the phone. Speaking to contacts of old, contacts of new contacts, lots of different people. Speaking to a lot of new people this week, which that's cool in one respect, but. It's probably why my voice is going because I've been doing a lot of that and really looking forward to the Korea tour as well. I can't stress how much I'm looking forward to that. It'll be very cool. Looking forward to seeing Korean fans in person and seeing kind of just their incredible passion for not only Tottenham but obviously Sonny and actually Sung Mo Lee, who I mentioned. I think he's going to be out there as well. So it'd be great to catch up with him, as I haven't seen him in a while. He's worked in England for a few years and now he's has left these shores a couple of years ago. So it'd be great to catch up with him. And obviously his knowledge of Korea is going to be very, very useful to me as I blunder my way around Seoul. So there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. Like I say, hopefully by the time I've got the next video, which I'm going to try and do on Sunday, we should, fingers crossed, have Yves Bissouma as a Tottenham Hotspur player. He plays as number 8, so I'd imagine he'll be another one that we don't see a number announced for immediately, because if Harry Winks does leave during the window, then obviously he will be nabbing that number 8 from him. Like I said, hold off on any of your shirt purchases for the new players, because, yeah, even though those new home shirts are out, I'd maybe hold off on getting a number on them until we're definitely sure what's going to happen with a few of the players leaving. Really, I think is going to be key to it. So there you go. Right, I'm about to hit the hour mark. So it's whether I decide to just try to make it. I know there was one person before when I just did it on exactly an hour. They were like saying about how their OCD was utterly justified, but now even just saying that has taken me over the hour. So yeah, I'm going to head off now. Going to enjoy hopefully the fixtures tomorrow and enjoy a few days off. Bissouma will probably be announced during my days off, and I'll be able to say, I'm on holiday again, and everyone will then continue for the rest of the transfer window to tell me to go on holiday, and I will. There's another one. There's a proper holiday coming out during the transfer window. Don't worry. And lots of stuff will hopefully happen in it that poor Guesty will have to report on rather than me. But yeah, going to head off now. As always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.